The generational change movement in the Democratic Party just launched its most pointed challenge yet. A 35-year-old firefighter and former Jeopardy contestant, Harry Jaron, says he will run for the seat currently held by 85-year-old Steny Hoyer, so 50 years older, and who would be 89 at the end of his next term.
Here's the bottom line. You don't put out a fire by sending in the same people who let it spread. You send in a firefighter. So I'll ask you again, do you really think that Steny Hoyer at 89 years old is the best person to represent us? Maryland deserves a new generation of leadership, and I'm ready to take up the fight.
That statement is essentially the mantra for young Democrats who believe the party is in trouble because the old guard keeps making the same bad decisions. And so they argue it's time for new blood. Kevin Madden back with us, and joining me in studio, Julie Roginski, a Democratic strategist and author of the Salty Politics newsletter on Substack. So, Julie, Harry Jaron points out in his campaign website, that he was born during Steny Hoyer's 5th term in Congress. Hoyer hasn't said if he's running again, and members of Congress have served into their 90s, but could this challenge push Steny Hoyer a little bit toward retirement, maybe push people to suggest he might want to think about retirement?
You know, I don't know that Steny Hoyer wants to retire, because I look at Jim Clyburn, who was in leadership with Steny Hoyer for a long time, who said, what do you want me to do? Give up my life if I don't run for Congress? Well, we're not here to make Jim Clyburn's life easier. We're here to make sure that we have a full complement of Democratic congresspeople and senators who can vote against the Republicans' bad policy ideas. And I'll give you an example. Since the start of this year, 3 Democratic members of Congress have died. And this horrible bill that Donald Trump and the Republicans just passed, this budget bill, passed by 1 vote. Had they been alive, this bill would not have passed. And I say that to say that we have to have a serious reckoning as Democrats about the fact that this is not a retirement community. We need to make sure that we have young, healthy people who are able to serve. And time comes for all of us. It's going to come for me. It's going to come for you, hopefully many, many, many decades down the road. But these people are many decades down the road. And we need to make sure that they understand that it's not just their careers that they're harming by sticking around too long. They're putting the lives of all of us and our future in jeopardy if something happens to them and they're not able to vote for or against legislation that's good for the country.
So, Kevin, as you know, one of the most prominent Democrats calling for this generational change is the DNC Vice Chair, David Hogg.
Right.
These are photos of the candidates his Leaders We Deserve organization supported in the last election. Lots of young blood, but only 4 of the 12 won their races. Can youth work against you? I mean, you're a comms guy. How do you frame the fight, depending on what side you're on, of age, youth, fresh blood versus experience?
Yeah, well, look, I think I largely agree with what Julie has laid out. This is anytime you have a youth movement like this, or especially when you have political parties, which are essentially organizations around ideas, organizations around issues, having new, fresh blood pushing on ideas and pushing on issues is ultimately a good thing. I think the hard part for the David Hoggs of the world and other young leaders inside the party is that, look, Steny Hoyer is there for 40 years for a reason. He knows every single inch of that district that he represents. He's spent the time working at VFW halls, all the party picnics that take place. And as a result, he has a very strong base of support in the district. And it's not just about what you read or hear or what you're fighting about on social media. And I think that was one of the criticisms that you've seen this candidate lob against the party, which is that, they're not in touch with the young base. They're not in touch with social media communications tools. It's a lot more than that. So if they're going to be successful, they're going to have to get really good at the grassroots and the organizing, as well as how they communicate inside the party.
We should say, Julie, that David Hogg isn't exactly reinventing the wheel. I mean, I go back to 2017 when an organization called Run for Something really pushed young progressives. They've had a pretty good success record. Their argument at the beginning, when I interviewed the founder, was that we need to have a pipeline, right? We need to start people maybe at the local level, at the county level, and then they go to Congress, and then they go to Senate, and maybe we will have a future president. You work your way up. Have Democrats figured out the way to use, because they're not the only ones either, use these disparate organizations, or what seem disparate, but have in many ways, the same goal.
Look, and Kevin can speak to this as a Republican, but I can tell you as a former Republican, maybe, Kevin, I don't know where you are these days, but GoPac, it was a brilliant and continues to be a brilliant pipeline organization for the Republicans that has been around since the 70s. And they have developed an incredible pipeline. Michael Steele was the former chairman of it. He could really speak to this. But the reality is Democrats have not done anything like this. And there's this very famous phrase that Democrats fall in love and Republicans fall in line. Well, Democrats are always looking for some leader to come along and be the president and to lead them out of the wilderness. We can't have that. We need to build an entire pipeline, whether it is a pipeline for the courts, like the Federalist Society has on the Republican side, on the conservative side, whether it's GoPac, as Republicans have for the state legislature, that eventually these people work their way up to Congress and eventually maybe even further to the Senate and maybe the presidency. Democrats don't have that right now, and it's a huge miss. And I would say that if you are a Democrat who is worth billions and billions of dollars and you're thinking about how to reinvent the wheel here for the party, the best way to do that is start these kinds of organizations that really find local young talent and nurture them and develop them. And again, it's not reinventing the wheel. The Republicans have done this incredibly effectively. We need to take a lesson from that.
Well, Kevin, she brings up a very good point, and that is money. That is fundraising, right? If you're a 20-something, you may be smart, you may be committed, you may do the hard work that David Hogg does, although he had a platform based on a terribly unfortunate situation, to say the least. But you need to have money. It's very hard to find a race, a competitive race, recently, where they're not spending more money than has ever been spent in that district or that state in history, right? And you probably don't have the contacts for fundraising when you're 25 or 26 as someone older has. So it does become a part of either a billionaire or somebody with deep pockets or the party, which gets to decide which races they support. Talk about the money issue and the challenge that presents for promising young leaders.
Well, I think money is only one part of it. When I worked on campaigns, we used to talk about resources. Resources meant time, money, effort, people. So I think looking more holistically is of a huge advantage anytime you're trying to build and manage and be successful with a political movement. And to Julie's point, I think I'll start to believe that these young leaders inside the party have a better chance when they start mapping out what their plan is, not for the next midterm election, but what's their plan to build, grow, and manage their movement over the next 10 years. And that is where money is part of this bigger, broader infrastructure of time, effort, resources, and you name it. Because if it's just about writing checks, you're right. It's only going to be the big donors. But when it's that bigger argument and it's a 10-year plan, that's where it has much greater impact.
Kevin Madden, Julie Roginski, not the last time we'll have this conversation. It's an important one. Thank you both. And still ahead, the Trump administration said its goal was to eliminate FEMA.